Hey guys, welcome back. My camera is back, safe and sound from Africa, and you probably recognize this mower, or maybe you don't. It's from the previous video I uploaded. It had a bent crank, and the self-propel, or the height adjustment, was all wonky. I ended up taking it apart. I started parting it out, and I discovered that the frame was actually in really good condition, and I figured that it would make a good project mower. And I kind of like this chassis because it has ball bearing wheels, and it has a metal bagger door in the rear, and it has 4-wheel height adjustment, so one lever controls all 4 wheels for height adjustment, and it's rear wheel drive, self-propel, not front wheel drive. We need a motor to go on this, right? So check out what I bought. Ain't she pretty? It actually smells really bad under here. It smells rotten. The deck is rotten and it smells rotten. This grass is just rotten under here. I think it was wet grass that was constantly in contact with the deck, and it blew it out. Blade is actually not bad. Everything doesn't seem bad except for the deck. I'm thinking an engine like this. I have a couple of these 7.0 horsepower Briggs & Stratton overhead valve motors. These are from the early 2000s. I think they're pretty good engines. The engine on the right has a bent crank, but otherwise it ran fine. The sump on the engine is also bad. It had, when I took it off the deck, one of the bolts broke off in the sump, and I was unable to get it out. I drilled and drilled, but it looked like it had been cross-threaded into the sump, and it was also rusted in there, so there is no getting that out, and I messed up the sump trying to do so. The engine on the left came from a rusted out mower, had a rusted deck. I don't know whether this motor runs or not. I've never seen it run before. I'm hoping that between the two of these things, we can get one good motor out of it. The motor on the left also has a bad sump. When I took the motor off the deck, one of the bolts was in there pretty hard, and I turned it with a wrench really hard. I think it was a breaker bar. And the bolt did not break, but unfortunately the sump cracked around where the bolt was. So that sump pan is no longer good. So neither of these motors has a good sump, but fortunately I have a new sump here that we can put on one of these two motors. I advocate that we start with this motor without the bent crank, because hopefully if this motor is okay internally, we can use the core of this one and, you know, replace or rebuild rusty or broken pieces, carburetor, ignition coil, that kind of thing, with pieces from the known good motor, well, the motor that runs with the bent crank. So I just loosely fitted it on the mower, and I put one bolt in it, and I want to do a compression test just to gauge the condition of the internals of this motor. Assuming this thing does have compression, it probably would be a good idea to check and to see if it has a bent crank. I don't even know that much about it. I have it all taken apart now, and the compression tester is installed. I do notice that the spark plug is quite black and carbony, so this thing was running rich the last time it ran. Carb problem? Not sure. But let's see what the compression is. Oh, don't fall over there. What is that? 110-ish? Yeah, 110-ish, maybe a little bit more. I have the dial indicator all set up, and I'm going to try and determine whether this crankshaft is bent or not. So I'm going to lift up on this engine and take a reading. So it's at this side of the crankshaft, it's at point, I guess it's reading like 0.043, 0.044. And if we spin it around on the complete opposite side, we're reading 0.04. Yeah, we're reading 43 there. And 44. Yeah, we're only about a couple thousandths, if that, off. Yeah, this crankshaft does not appear to be bent at all. There's very little run out on it, maybe a couple thousandths. So that's good. I'm comfortable proceeding with this. Here's the new oil sump that I bought on eBay for about 15 bucks. And I took a wire wheel to it and cleaned off some of the old flaking paint and all of that. I didn't do the bottom or anything like that, but I also took I also used a soft brass wheel and cleaned up the gasket mating surface here, so it would be ready to go. At this point, I want to replace the crankshaft oil seal. There we go. Now it's coming. Good. I cleaned up the inside of the sump as best I could. I tried to get everything out I could, all the dirt, sludge, gasket pieces and everything out. And more or less I think I succeeded. I also cleaned up the oil seal, crankshaft oil seal area. And so now I think it is time to install a new oil seal. So the new oil seal is part number 399781S, and it's basically identical to the old one. And what I'm going to do is I am going to use my bearing race and seal installer to install this thing. And this one is just about the right size for that. And I'm going to install it this way so I can recess it down into the hole slightly, the way the old one was. So let me get this thing put together and we'll install it. What we're going to do is we're going to just place the seal right here and kind of see if we can get it started by hand a little bit. And maybe just tap very gently, get it started. And then I'm going to use the bearing race and seal installer and try and tap that in. Is that going in evenly? No, we got a little bit more on this side. That's better. Yeah, I think we're evening up. Just a little tap. These things are really meant to drive big bearing, these bearing races, right? And seals on differentials and transmissions and things like that. That's why I got this. But since I don't really work on cars that much anymore because of the kids and time constraints, I don't really have a chance to use some of my cool tools. And figured this is an excuse to use some of them again. Even as possible is the key. just like if you were installing a differential seal or a bearing race on a pinion gear or something like that. Same idea. How are we doing? Just about there. I wanted to recess just a little bit more in the hole. How's that? Maybe just a tad more. What do you think? Yeah, that's perfect. Let me show you. Huh? How about that? So you couldn't get much more perfect than that. Perfectly even all the way around. Good. Now it's time to take the old sump off, and let me show you what has happened with this sump cover. First of all, there is a bolt broken off in it. That's one. And then two, I don't know whether you can see it, but right here, this thing has cracked. So the bolt was stuck in there very hard, and when I went to turn it out, the whole sump cover cracked right there. And so this is no longer any good. Before I go and take this off, I want to clean up this crankshaft just a little bit. There's a little bit of surface rust, so I'm going to take some 400 grit emery cloth and something to lube down the crankshaft with, and I'm just going to kind of get rid of that surface rust. It doesn't have to become completely shiny, but just I want it somewhat smooth. Let's see how that looks. That looks pretty good. Happy with that. Oh, alright, that's pretty good. I like that. Why don't we take the sump cover off now? Little tappy tap. Hopefully you guys are a little more stable. This thing did crack loose. So let's see. I don't want to damage the oh, came right off. Perfect. Everything in here looks pretty good. Alright, so I'm going to go around with the gasket scraper and try and carefully clean up the gasket mating surface. You guys don't need to watch me carefully scrape a gasket like that, so I will bring you back after this surface is all cleaned up and ready to go. Okay, so I cleaned it up, and I ended up using the brass wheel on it, and I stuffed a sock down in there to try and keep most of the gasket material out of the crankcase. And for the most part, I was successful. I ended up, wiping a little bit out of there and going through there, but nothing too bad. And then I wiped down the surface with carburetor cleaner, and you want this surface to be very smooth and very clean, no oil, because if there is oil, it will not seal. The gasket will not seal. So I run my finger around and there's no dirt or oil that's coming off, and I think we're ready to go. So I know a lot of people use RTV on the mating surface. They'll use the gasket along with RTV. I'm not sure whether that's necessary or not. You know, sure, there's the surfaces are not perfect, but if you torque it to the spec and you know the surfaces are clean and free of oil and smooth, I think that it should probably seal. Here is the new gasket, and it looks like it should go on just like so. Good, perfect fit. Alright, I have the sump cover here, and I have the governor set on the governor arm like that. We need a little bit of oil. I'm just gonna, you really should be using clean oil, but you kind of want to oil the mating surface here a little bit. There you go. Alright, here we go. These are supposed to be torqued to 90 inch-pounds. But first, I'm just going to hand tighten them. Let's just snug these down just a little bit. Now these are supposed to be torqued down to 90 inch-pounds, so I am just going to do that, and I'm just going to use a kind of go back and forth to torque these things down. So the question is, I did not use any RTV or anything like that. Is this thing going to leak? I don't know, but we will find out. If it does, we'll take it off and do it again. Alright guys, I think that I'm going to end this video here. So this video was all about replacing the sump on this engine and checking the run out of the crankshaft and the compression of the engine overall, just to gauge the health of the engine. So I think the next video is going to be about the cylinder head. We're going to take the cylinder head off this engine and evaluate it and maybe do some valve lapping. If you like these videos, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, and I will see you on the next one.